I was trying to tell my sister, who's really struggling, like we all are, with the evil and good and how this is and what Hashem is doing. And I was just trying to explain to her that Ein Od Milvado, there's nothing but Hashem, and everything is good, even if it's so far beyond what our human mortal mind could possibly grasp. That everything is good, including what's happening to us. It's happening for us. And she was struggling with that. And this is just a very, very small example, and you have to be careful saying things like that, considering the horrific tragedies, the orphans, the widows, the kidnapped, the trauma that an entire nation is going through. You got to be careful saying it's all for the good, but we're just us here, the fellowship. We're a family here, and we're at the place where you can understand what I'm saying right now. And that's just a small example of that. And I want to talk to you about how this is all for the good. And I want to talk to you about what we're facing right now at the farm in specific. A lot of you have been reaching out saying, I'm reading articles that something happened at the farm, what's going on? So I wanted to talk about that. But before I do, I just want to start with the Torah portion, because these portions are so rich and there's so much happening. Never in my life has it been such a struggle for me to learn, to sit down and to learn Torah. I feel like between guarding and patrolling and my family and everything that we're going through, it's just so hard. And I know I'm not alone. I speak to my friends and they say that also. But, and so I'm trying to forgive myself. But ultimately, we really need to learn. We need to learn Torah now, because it's the blueprint for us. It's guiding us through everything that we're going through right now, everything we've been through up until now, and everything we will go through up until now. And the Torah portion really speaks to us. And in some ways, this Torah portion was somewhat of a consolation for me, just at the very end, when it says that, that Isaac and Ishmael buried their father Abraham together. And it says that only will there be able to truly be peace when Ishmael comes and proactively, voluntarily, through a place of understanding, sort of yields the way and says, this is my brother Isaac. He was the chosen of my father. And then we could turn and say, well, you were chosen as well. We're all chosen, but we're chosen to tell you how chosen you are. And so you see reconciliation there. And that gave me a glimmer of hope, because it feels like we're so far from that right now. So far from that. It's hard for me to even imagine what reconciliation would look like. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around it, because I just don't know how we can possibly go back to the level of coexistence that we had before. If the nearby settlement of Ibei Nachal, there was Arab construction building the homes there, right next to my daughter Dvash's kindergarten, and it always made me uncomfortable. And I was constantly going and checking and making sure that the guard there was vigilant and whatever. We're going to go back to that now. Who's going to let that happen? Who has the trust that they just won't go in and butcher babies? I don't know how we're going to go back to what it was. But this week's Torah portion, it gives us that sort of hope at the very end. And so this week's Torah portion is called Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah, because it starts with a conclusion of Sarah's life, right? This is one of the verses I memorized since I was a little boy, because my rabbi was teaching us a certain methodology we've talked about in the past of memorizing the Torah. So we would sing it together. V'yu Chayei Sarah, and the life of Sarah was Mea Shanim, 100 years. V'sheva v'esrim shana. Anyways, we would sing it together, and so that it has a special place in my heart. We learn about Sarah's life because she left the world at the beginning of this week's Torah portion. And Abraham, I'm going to try to make it a little tighter, because I see I'm already running out of time. But Abraham goes and purchases for her a plot in Hebron called Ma'arat HaMachpelah, right, the cave of Machpelah. And it's actually a beautiful, we have a beautiful piece of art, Shana and I do, behind our Shabbat table, done by the famous Baruch Nachshon. Shana's parents gave it to us for our wedding as a gift. And it says it right there, it quotes the Midrash. It says, Shlosha mekomot, she'ein umot ha'olam yecholim lomar, gazaltem him. There's 3 places that the nations of the world cannot say that we stole from them. Right? So let's just take a step back. Through prophecy, Abraham knew that this Hebron, Ma'arat HaMachpelah, was the divinely selected place where the mamas and the papas, the forefathers and our foremothers would be buried. I don't know if that's a word, foremothers. This is where Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah were buried. And of course, we know the famous faith belief that we have that Adam and Eve were also buried there as well. And it's, on some level, it's the entrance to the Garden of Eden, whatever that means. We don't fully understand that. We, of course, know Rachel was buried on the road between Bethlehem and Ephrata, where she weeps for her children on the spiritual dimension to this very day, I think at this very moment. So this rabbi in Modi'in, Rav Sobel, shared a very important idea about these cities. So he was saying that the Western thinking tends to focus on the conflict in the world through a prism of finances, right, and materialism. Everything is about money. Everything's about money and the inequality or inequity of money or whatever, and that's what it's all about. And if you just throw enough money at anything, then you can solve it. And I think they're, of course, projecting their own Western culture on this, on the world, just projecting their own hierarchy of values and force-fitting that to the rest of the world and insisting the world is exactly like them. And there's a certain arrogance that's part of the human condition, but particularly in the West. But our enemies, he pointed out, can't be bribed or bought, right? So the Midrash says that there's 3 cities that we cannot, that our enemies cannot say that we stole from them, because in the Torah itself, it teaches, as we see, that they were purchased for good money. Shechem, the city of Shechem, the Temple Mount, and Hebron. And in this week's Torah portion, we learn about Hebron. So they were purchased for money. So our enemies can't say that we stole it from them. But it's exactly those cities that they're focusing on and saying that we stole from them. And because the enemies we're dealing with right now, our enemies, they can't be bribed or bought out. Maybe for a few weeks or so, or for a few months, they will delay their genocidal plans for the right financial incentive, but they're only taking that incentive in order to further their final goal, which is the wholesale genocide of the nation of Israel. They're so single-mindedly focused in the most obsessive way imaginable on murdering every single Jew. Just that alone, we should look and say this is obviously and clearly a spiritual war. This isn't about their level of financial stability in Gaza. That's just so ridiculous. They're focusing on wiping us out, and of course the rest of the infidel shortly thereafter. But their focus right now is on the nation of Israel. And I've been watching the narratives of our enemies, and I listen to their arguments, and they say Gaza is an open air prison, and they've been oppressed, and they want their own state. And somehow, in their twisted minds, right, this can somehow explain and justify the most savage evil of putting a baby in an oven while raping the mother to the cries and shrieks of her dying, burning baby. I'm sorry that I'm saying this, but we have to keep it alive within us. We can't forget how savage and evil and sick and dark and twisted they are. And that's just one of the thousands of examples. And, so that we hear the world explaining this stuff away, justifying it, whitewashing possibly the greatest evil the world has ever seen, right? And I just don't even know how to come to terms with that. But so Jews are coming to terms that we're dealing with an extraordinarily dark spiritual force who revels and celebrates murder and torture and absolute horror, and that this is a spiritual war, and the world may not see it. They may buy the very simple, shallow TikTok posts, but this spiritual force has already declared war on every single infidel in the world. And the Jewish people are simply the vanguard. We're simply the tip of the spear, the front lines in the battle against evil on behalf of all of humanity.